We're at Confeitaria do Balão. This is right across from that huge market in Porto. And today what I thought we'd do is do some port wine tasting. After all, we're in Porto, so why not do a port wine tasting? And we're going to visit some port houses, we're going to visit some wine bars, but I figured we'd start our day off at this little pasteleria. It's absolutely stunning in here with the, it's like almost Art Deco with these tall mirrors. And this place caught my eye when we were shopping in the market the other day, so I thought we'd come back here and try some of their pastry. And the reason why I wanted to start our port wine crawl is because when you go into a bakery, into a little cafe, a pasteleria, port wine is not just for fancy places. I think in the US we kind of have this vision in our head that port wine is only for special occasions, it's very expensive, it's very fancy. Here in Porto, they drink port wine every day. It's a regular part of meals, and you can get in the cafe even though it's before noon. So we'll talk more about the different kinds of port. This one is Ruby, which is the most common type of port wine. It's a mixture of, it's a blend of different years, so it's not from a single vintage, and it's usually relatively inexpensive. Of course, you can get expensive ones too. And it's usually served up in a couple of years. Normally, I don't think you'll find rubies that are particularly aged. So, that's I looked at the bottle when he served it. That's a Ramos Pinto port. Never heard of them, but they've been around for a while apparently. And that's a really nice port. It's not, if you expect your port wine to be very, very sweet, this is not that. Is there some sweetness to it? Yes. But there's also some nice complexity, some dark berry flavor to it. I like it. Even though it's, you know, fancy port drinkers would probably look down their nose or think it's at the lower end of the ports that you might try. I like it. I found it good. So, of course, we had to get some pastry. I got a little almond tart here, and I got a pastel de nata. Karen went and got the shaker of cinnamon, so got to put a little bit of cinnamon onto our pastel de nata. Oh yeah. Always looking for that flaky, crispy crust with the pastel de nata. This has it. Creamy inside too, of course. Great match with my Ruby port. And then try a little bit of this almond tart. Wow. So it's got like an almond custard on the inside, more dense than you would imagine a custard being. But then they topped it with almonds in sugar, caramelized sugar. So you get big pieces of almond in there too. That's really good too. I was going to have some coffee. No, we'll have a little more port. Ooh. All right. Great way to start the day on our port crawl. Just a little bit of port. We'll see how I do as the day progresses. This is Candelabro, and this is in the Trinidad neighborhood, which is quickly becoming my favorite neighborhood here in Porto. We're out on the street here on the terrace, on the patio, so you're going to hear some traffic going by. Sorry about that, but inside they're playing some loud music, so came outside just for a minute to tell you about what I got. This is an aged white port. Don't see this very often. Look at the color on this. It's almost orange in color. Really nice looking. So what's the difference between a white port and a red port? basically the kind of grapes you use. Still the same process of making the port, but instead they use white grapes. And this is a relatively new entrant in the world of port. You don't see it a lot, and usually it's not aged. It's like a Ruby in that they age it in stainless steel or in concrete. They put it in the barrels and they sell it. But this one has been aged 10 years. So that's unusual. White ports are, a lot of them, you'll see them in cocktails, like a port and tonic. It's almost an accident right here on the street. A port and tonic cocktail. But this I just got straight. And I don't know how many times I've seen this in Porto. Not too often, definitely, especially the 10-year age. So, yeah, I'm really liking the ports. There's definitely more sweetness in that than the Ruby that we had earlier this morning. But still, there's still a little bit of complexity there. Maybe the aging helps a little bit. So anyway, I think you're definitely getting, there goes a motorcycle. I'm definitely getting some nice color off of the, it must be aged in oak, because look at that color that it gets off of it. And you get some nice complexity coming out of that wood. So yeah, 10 years port. This was like €7, so that's a nice value. Something unusual. I don't know how many more times I'd have that, but it was good. This place, Candelabro, really kind of a hole-in-the-wall type place. Don't have much in the way of food. Like we got some lupini beans. They got peanuts and olives on the menu. You're not coming here for lunch. You're coming here for a drink. But the other thing is, right next door, they have a little bookstore. So you can go in, maybe get a book, sit here on the terrace, enjoy your 10-year-old white port, and watch the world go by here in the Trinidad neighborhood, and listen to the kids yelling across the street. So our next stop is Aduela, and we're still in the Trinidad neighborhood, and I would say this place kind of would be classified as a dive bar if we were in the US, but I was just talking about this with Karen. I was saying, you know what, yeah, it's a dive bar, but in the US that kind of has the connotation of some kind of menace going on, and you don't feel that. It's totally chill. They happen to be cranking some 60s music in there, so couldn't record in there, but they had several ports available, and they serve it. I mean, look at this glass. You think port wine is just for high class, expensive drinking? Look, they serve it in this chipped little wine glass. But they did have a cool selection of port wines, and one of which being the dry white port, which is fairly uncommon. So I'm gonna have to find out how they make this. I would bet, normally port wine is sweet, and that's because when the grapes are fermenting, they add in a distilled spirit to stop the fermentation process before all the sugar has been eaten by the yeast. Therefore, you've got some residual sugar and it tastes sweet. This is a dry port. That must mean, I don't know enough about port to know this for sure, but that must mean that they leave the adding of the distillate until the very end of the process, when all the sugar has been eaten. I can't imagine any other way that they do it. I'll do some more investigation during this video. Maybe I'll have an answer for you by the end. Maybe I won't. Let's try it though. So this is a white grape, obviously. Obviously not barrel aged, because it's a very light color, straw golden color, like a Chardonnay or something like that. They say it's dry. I taste just a little tiny bit of sweetness in there. It's not as dry as, say, a sherry, another fortified wine that you would get, but it's pretty dry. It's much less sweet than the other ports that you would get here. So if you're turned off by port's sweetness, if you think, oh, I don't like ports, they're too sweet, this might be a good option for you. Anyway, give it a try when you come to Porto. Latest stop is the wine box, and we got a couple of flights of port wine inside. I had to come outside. I'm sorry, it's really loud out here, but I had to come out here because they're playing loud music inside, so we came outside. I want to tell you where we've been so far, because I want to assure you we haven't been drinking all day. We've been drinking a good portion of the day, but not all day. We stopped for lunch, and we were in a place called The Kind Kitchen. It's a little vegetarian place. I had some falafel that was really nice. Karen had some tofu nuggets that were really good as well. Really nice place in the Trinidad neighborhood. And then we went down to the St. Francis Monument Church, which has an ossuary in it. That's why we kind of wanted, there were catacombs and an ossuary in there, and that's why we wanted to go down in there. Frankly, the catacombs and the ossuary were a bit of a disappointment. When you think of catacombs, you're like, all right, I'm going to be snaking down through caves and dark space. It's not that. There's a few crypts down there from a couple hundred years ago, but that's about it. And then the ossuary is literally a piece of glass in the floor, and then down below, tourists jaywalking, and then down below is just a bunch of bones scattered underneath the floor. Really, really disappointing. If you want to see an ossuary, I would say skip that in Porto. When you're in Lisbon, take a day trip to Évora, go to the Chapel of Bones there. That's the place to go. But the church itself, that I almost skipped after being so disappointed in the ossuary, almost skipped the church. It's pretty magnificent. And it's quite different than a lot of Gothic-style churches that you might see in Portugal, even Age of Discovery, so-called Renaissance churches you might see in Portugal. Not like that at all. It's very gilded, gold colors, intricate carvings, that type of stuff that you don't see as much in Portugal. So that was interesting to see. Worth €9? I don't know, man. There's so many free churches with so much great artwork in it in Portugal. You'll have to make the call on that. Then we came down here. This place is called the Wine Box. And the reason I like this place, they have a huge selection of wines, red wines, white wines, sparkling wines, and what we came for, a huge selection of port wines. So the thing about this place is they have port wines from all kinds of different producers. It's not one producer. If you go across the river, which we're going to do next, if you go across the river to Vila Nova de Gaia, that's where all the port houses are. You walk into a port house and they're going to sell you their wines. So that's all you can get, is what they offer, their wines. It's interesting to do because you can do a tour of their facility, and that's interesting, and then you can do a taste. But I like a place like this because you have such a huge variety of all of these different wines. So what we did was we got 2 flights, one flight of 3 different rubies, a fine ruby, a vintage ruby, and a reserve ruby. And then I got a flight of 3 tawnies, a fine tawny, an aged vintage tawny, and then this one. This is what I've been waiting to get. So, first of all, what is a tawny? I explained what a ruby was earlier. A tawny is aged usually in oak barrels. Therefore, it imparts more of the dark, rich flavors to it. It spends a couple of years in there, just like when a wine spends time in oak. You get more caramel flavors, you get more maybe tobacco flavors, some dark fruit flavors, things like that. That's what a tawny is. So therefore tawnies will, there goes a cute dog. there are tawnies that will improve with age, and that's why you find tawnies that are aged 10 years, 20 years, 25, 30, and 40 years. This particular tawny that I've been looking for, that I haven't been able to find yet today, is called Colletta. And what that means is it's a single vintage tawny. It comes from a single year. The other tawnies, they're blends from different years. This is a single vintage tawny. So this is what I've been looking for. This is what I got. Really nice, complex. This is probably closer to what you think about when you're thinking of port, because maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a little sweeter. I don't know, the rubies, some of them were kind of sweet too. This has some sweetness to it, but a real nice complexity to it as well. I don't know, me, I'm getting definitely some caramel, some dark fruit in there, some like red berry fruit in there, maybe blackberry. This is a nice tawny, and I'm so glad we were able to find this here at the Wine Box. This is a place to stop by. I know it's loud out here. There's a lot of traffic. We sit inside. They're playing some yacht rock. We're relaxing. We're eating some almonds and drinking port wine. It's a good day. So we crossed the river for our next destination, Quevedo Winery. Not without a little drama, getting across the bridge. I'll tell you, since the last time we were in Porto in 2019, it just seems significantly more crowded here. And I understand the hypocrisy of me as a tourist saying that, but I just got to point it out. When you're here, expect to be jostling with crowds. It's just the way of the world. And that's kind of why I said maybe, get into some of the outlying neighborhoods, because man, the stuff around São Bento, the stuff on the river, it is so busy there. Anyway, we are on the side of the river called Vila Nova de Gaia. This was an old Celtic settlement several hundred years before the Romans got here in like 2nd century, 1st century BC. And it's it's right across the river from Porto. You can walk across the bridge and boom, you are here. So it's easy to get to. And this is where the wineries are. If you want to do a tour of a winery, this is where you'll come. And all the big ones are here. Sandman and Taylor and Croft and all those big ones, they are here on this side of the river. The thing is, most of these now have been gobbled up by international conglomerates. Quevedo is one of the few exceptions. This place is actually still family owned. I think they're 5 generations in now, maybe 6 generations. And they've resisted the urge to sell out to a large corporation. And that's why we came here today. I also asked the gentleman who served us a couple questions about port wine, because what I read was, now port is a fortified wine, so that's what you need to know first and foremost. What they do is they ferment the grapes just like a regular wine would, but at a certain step in that fermentation process, they stop the fermentation with a distilled spirit. That means the sugar that's eating the yeast remains in the port wine. Normally with the dry wine, they wait until all the sugar has been eaten by the yeast, and that's why it's dry. That's why it's not sweet. However, when you pour in a distilled spirit, it stops the fermentation process and the sugar resides in the port wine. That's why your port wine is sweet. Anyway, that's how port is made. But I asked the guy at the wine box, what is the specific distilled spirit that they add to that wine? Is it straight alcohol? Is it brandy? If you read about port, you'll often see them say a brandy is added to the grape mixture to stop the fermentation process. You read this over and over again. I recently came across a story and it said it was aguardent that is added. Now aguardent, and I've had aguardent in other videos that I've done here on this channel, but aguardent is basically like grappa. It's distilled from the grape skins and the seeds and the stems that are left over from the winemaking process. It's just the name that they use here in Portugal, aguardent. And you can go into a liquor store and you can buy aguardent. And I asked the guy at the last place we went, the wine box, hey, is it true that they use aguardent? And he said no. He completely shut down what I was saying. And I was like, okay, so I guess it's not aguardent, I guess it's something else. I asked him what it was, he didn't know. Came here. This gentleman who we talked to poured our wine is very knowledgeable about it, and he said yes, definitively here in this winery, Quevedo, they use aguardent. So I'm going to go with that it's aguardent that's used in order to stop the fermentation and to retain the residual sugar in the port. So there you go. I think it's interesting and wanted to share that. What did I get? Well, I wanted to get this one. This is a rosé port because I haven't seen rosé ports here in Porto. So I thought this would be interesting. I think rosés are rather rare with port wine. So I thought I'd get this. Normally, I'm not a rosé drinker, although I don't have anything against it. I just don't normally drink it. But I wanted to try it because it's unusual, right? So still retains some of that sweetness that you expect from a port, but very bright strawberry, light red fruit flavor to that. And it's nice. Would I sit there and drink a bottle of it? Probably not. Would I sit and drink it on a hot summer afternoon? Maybe I'd have a glass. This would probably be really nice with a cocktail. I'll bet if they made a port tonic with this, it would be really good. So that's that. Good. This is a tawny. This is the 20-year-old tawny. And again, tawnies are usually aged in wood. So you get that extra caramel, oxidized flavor with them. They are more expensive and more rare in general than the rubies. And this particular one has been aged 20 years. They also have, I think, a 30. They definitely had a 40-year aged tawny on the menu here at Quevedo. So this is the 20. See, now that is really nice. So that's developed some really intense flavor, but not tannic, not as tannic as you might expect, because there's still some sweetness on your tongue. I would say dark red fruit flavors, maybe some cherry in there. Yeah, definitely some caramel. Yeah, definitely some caramel in there. I would say this would be really nice with a piece of dark chocolate. So Quevedo is definitely my choice. If you're coming across the river, you want to do a tour. We didn't do a formal tasting here. We just selected some stuff off the menu. But if you want, you can have them walk you through each individual one, if that's what you want to do, and they'll tell you even more about the process of what they do here at Quevedo. But if you want to come here to this side of the river, I would say Quevedo should be one of your first stops. So I thought we'd finish today's video on the riverfront here in Gaia, right across from all these great port houses. And I started the video by saying that we got a glass of the port called Ramos Pinto, and I said wasn't familiar with that port house. Turns out they've been around since 1880, so should have heard of them. And they've got a winery, a cellar right here on the riverfront. Big, bright yellow facade. Don't know how I missed it, but I did. I missed it. But they've been doing it for a long time. One thing you'll notice when you come here to Vila de Novo Gaia is that a lot of these port houses have English names, not Portuguese names. The place we went to, Quevedo, that's probably a Portuguese name, but there's places like Churchill's and Taylor and Graham. Those are all English names. They're not Portuguese names. And the reason for that is the Portuguese developed a great relationship with the British. It's been a long-standing diplomatic, trading, friendly relationship between the two countries, one of the longest between two countries in all of Europe. And the British developed a taste for port wine when they were at war with France and they couldn't get their hands on French wine. So they started drinking port. And to this day, if you go to Britain, they still enjoy port. And they came down here and they opened a lot of these port houses, gave them their British names. So that's why you'll see that when you come down here. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like the video, subscribe to it as well. If you like fortified wine, I also did a video about Muscatel, which is another fortified wine down south of Lisbon in the Setúbal region. So you can watch that as well. I also did some other videos here about Porto that aren't just about wine. So you can check those out as well. I'll have a playlist of Porto locations here on the YouTube channel. You can check me out as well at destinationeatdrink.com. I have a weekly podcast, destinationeatdrink.com/pod. Thanks for watching. I'll see you down the road.